Hello and welcome to a Song of Ice and Fire battle report. This is the third game in the Belcompton Remembers series, an event run in Canberra in March 2023, and I've been playing Free Folk with my two commanders being Varamyr and Mag the Mighty. We've had a strong win with Varamyr in round 1, technically a crushing victory with Mag the Mighty in round 2, but a very close crushing victory, if that makes sense. Definitely a game that was seesawing back and forward against a really interesting Greyjoy list. And now we are heading into our last game, which is against Baratheons, and we're going to be playing Varamyr again. Let's jump forward to the table and deployment and see what's up. So the scenario here is Dark Wings, Dark Words, and this is going to be an interesting game, an interesting and a fast game. My opponent, well, we've got basically my opponent has put weirwoods down. I've obliged and put down 1 unit of stakes, and the weirwoods are literally for my part. I put down 1, and I put it down in a position that wasn't really going to favor one side, because I am playing Free Folk. Okay, I'll put down 1 weirwood, and my opponent was immediately like, "Fantastic, let's have more of those." And in retrospect, right, I think he's right. I actually said when I was deploying this, I genuinely said, I could almost make this a corpse pile, because I think failing morale checks is worse for you than for me. But I made it a weirwood, and my opponent immediately jumped on board with that. And absolutely that read was correct. Failing morale checks for Baratheons sucks. Not only do the casualties matter kind of more in an elite army like this, but on top of that, there are cards in the Baratheon deck, something like multiple cards, or there's at least one, that really wants you to pass a panic check. And if you don't pass those panic checks, that really sucks. Then we have things like Kingsmen, who have to the last, and they need to make a morale check to not die. And if you don't pass that morale check, that really sucks. So yeah, placing weirwoods as Baratheons, 10 out of 10 play. I've also put stakes down here because of my usual modus operandi of make one side crap. So, and that would pay off this game, by the way, because my opponent won the roll and he picked deployment rather than side, specifically because of that. Now, what's gone on? Okay, my opponent has deployed. We have Stannis himself in a unit of Stag Knights. Stag Knights are a little overcosted at 8 points, but they're a fun, cool unit. And he's gone for a 4-3 split with NCUs. So, these could be Queensmen or they could be Kingsmen. But he's got the points to make them, they could be a 7-point unit with 1-point attachment somewhere, but he has the points to make them something else. So, fair cop. Nothing wrong with Stag Knights, they're very good. Really the only thing, if these were a 7-point unit, then a 7-point unit could be Champions of the Stag. But Champions of the Stag aren't the powerhouse they were for the last 12 months, so I think this is fine. We then have Kingsmen with no attachment, just good, solid 7-point unit. To the Last is a great ability. Kingsblade is a great ability. They're a good unit. There was a strong consensus before the most recent patch that you should never play Kingsmen, you should always play Queensmen. I think that's kind of short-sighted. Queensmen were very good, and you should play Queensmen. But being you should only play Queensmen it's the kind of thinking you kind of see on the internet about this game. Kingsmen absolutely had their place in some lists. They are the puncher unit, they're interesting, they're strong. And in this case, I think what this list is trying to do, they fit just fine. Would I want Queensmen? No, I think I like Kingsmen here. We then have an unit of Law Lightbringers, one of the best archer units in the game, a reasonably costed 6 points. And then as an anchor unit, we have a unit of Wardens with, I forget his name, but here's the attachment that gives True Conviction and rerolls to defense dice if you have the crown. As our NCUs, we have Crescent, Shire Errol, and Aester Florent. So very sort of on meta, 4-3 split, 7 activations is the good minimum you kind of want in most lists. Only a very small number of lists want to play 6 activations, and even then it's a bit dicey. We have a fairly wide deployment here. Now, this army could probably have condensed this way a little bit, but my opponent actually was quite clear that no, he likes to deploy occupying just a little bit more horizontal space, and it does against he plays against Free Folk a lot. He's got a regular Free Folk opponent. Both of them were at this event. His opponent would actually come first overall and was playing Rattleshirt and Mag, but he has this as a strategy just to keep the line just a little bit wider against Free Folk trying to work around and come in from the side. I know his regular opponent plays Harmer in Raiders really often, stuff like that. Val as a permanent fixture. So I kind of respect this as sort of we are widening the line, so our flank gets pushed further this direction. It would not really pay off versus me. But I get it as an option. For my part, I've just done the usual thing, right? I am going to out deploy my opponent every single day of the week and twice on Fridays, particularly when he has begun deploying. Like he deploys one of his things, I deploy Jarl in outflank. He deploys one of his things, I deploy Varamyr. He deploys one of his things, I deploy a unit of raiders. Like nothing is on the table, right? Like his whole army is deployed, and I've placed these down at plus Jarl, and then I'm about to do my fourth deployment. So I have total flexibility as usual. Again, this list is very powerful. I will not be playing it again in a casual game, and probably not that much in events either. But what we've gone with is we've got Ygritte over here, the Walrus clan chieftain here, the raid leader unit here, another raid leader unit here, and the Weeper here, and then the Wolves here, because the Wolves really want to get into Stannis' unit. Turning off Relentless just jobs the Stag Knights. They go from pretty tough to like made of absolute paper, and my goal is going to be to secure that kill. My opponent, I'm going first. That's right, I'm going first. I've chosen to go first because I want to bring Jarl on as early as possible, and I'm not going to be able to bring Jarl on realistically. Like I could bring him on here, but like let's not be stupid. He would get shot immediately in the flank by Lightbringers, or charged immediately in the flank by the Wardens. So I want to go first so that Jarl can come on turn 2. But I have brought on the cat here, and my opponent has sort of died a little bit inside because they have no immediate response to that. This honestly feels like it's a really good situation, and we have some missions here that are going to be a little bit awkward as well. One of the first one that's the first and most relevant one that's dropped is the horse or the swords will score your opponent 1 VP. I've taken the letters with Styr. I have. By the way, why is Styr in this list? Part of the reason why Styr is in this list is so that he can influence the beasts early in the game, because the beasts are often attacking early in the game. If you remember my previous battle report, on turn 1, I got wolves like all the way across the table and into melee with Jorah Mormont and could have killed him. But the cat is the real, like, often the unit that gets it. If you put Styr on the cat, his damage output increases hugely. He goes from 2 dice to 3 with Sundering. And suddenly you have, like, rear charges into 3+ save units that you're putting them on 6s with the penalty. You can easily wipe whole ranks out, and it's just some use of Styr. And then as the game continues, obviously Styr is going to start going on these raiders, and you're going to look to stack all of the force multiplication. You're going to look to get, you've got Vicious from let's say over here, for example, we've got the Weeper and a Raider with Raid Leader. So we can get, if we put Styr on the Weeper and it's engaging the same unit, we have 8 dice on 3s with Sundering and Vicious. That's not bad for a 4-point unit. I love doing things like force multiplying chaff units. I like taking weak units and making them strong, and Styr will really complement that sort of over the course of this game. So this is how things look as the game begins, and the game is going to develop really quickly. So let's jump forward to turn 2. So here's turn 2 when the action is about to begin. Rather than deal with the cat, my opponent has just gone, there's nothing I can do about this, and just marched the Lightbringers forward, and I have obliged by, once the coast is totally clear, once every zone is occupied, etc., etc., I've yeeted the cat into it and done 3 wounds. Not bad for, like, I've tied up the raiders. My opponent is going first on the turn that is to come, so I have tied up his Lightbringers with a melee asset, which means that if he's going to claim the swords on the first turn, he's in a bad spot. Otherwise, everything is just kind of maneuvered forward. The Wolves has set up to get into kind of like a flank charge over here. The Weeper has marched forward and just angled slightly, so if he wants to, he can get over here. And these guys have actually, they've, rather than maneuver straight forward, because this is one of the units that I had to move early, and I didn't want to move into line of fire and to range of the Lightbringers, so I just maneuvered them in this direction. And they've actually been jumped a little bit, but this position, they actually are supposed to be angled just very, very, very slightly in towards this objective. Varamyr has just moved up to here and destroyed the stakes, and we've just moved forward and presented the line. I gave some consideration to hanging everything back and not moving anything into range of the Lightbringers, but ultimately I figured it wasn't really going to be avoidable. I wanted to secure the objective. I was going to bring Jarl on next turn, so let's make things happen. So round 2 begins. The objectives have stayed the same, but we have, just as a little bit of a note, what's going to happen in the flanks is the ones that we've got waiting to come on are, I think, active is if this unit destroys a regiment, put 2 victory points on it. And then we have the that's what's sort of like coming up now, and like Destroyer Commander. But things are going to change. Over the course of this turn, my opponent wants to like I leave zones empty. I don't want to claim because the horse and the swords are still worth a VP, so I take other zones, and my opponent is left in a situation where they've got one NCU active on a zone that will give no VPs, and two NCUs to activate, and two zones that are worth points for me. So he's actually going to use Stannis to flip that objective, and when he flips that objective, he's going to flip it. He's going to replace it with like if you destroy something, and that is going to reveal if you control the center objective, score an extra 2 points. So with these things in motion, let's see how things look at the end of the round. So here's the end of round 2, beginning of round 3 situation, and what has gone on? Well, Varamyr hasn't moved. The reason Varamyr hasn't moved is he's rotated in the mission that makes the central objective worth an extra 2 points, and that happened very late in the turn, and the Raiders made a run for it. Assisted with I think they actually had a diversion tactics to help them get there. They have occupied this point, and they've scored me 3. Ygritte has moved up onto, I'm not sure why this is over here. She's sitting on an objective right now, so she's on 1, and the Weeper has moved up over here. Stannis just forfeited his activation. I made a YOLO charge with the Raiders. I did it on the Raid Leader. I did it on the grounds that there were weirwoods nearby. I may as well roll it. I needed like a 3+. I rolled a 6. I got in. And I wanted to move forward anyway. The consequence of failure would probably be low. So we've run into done like no damage. I think I did 1 damage with the charge. My opponent used resilience knowing that he would not have another window, because the immediate next thing that happened is that the wolves moved in, triggered gang up, and did another. They'd actually rolled fairly badly. I think it was another disorderly, and they did another 2 wounds. Or maybe they did they did another 2 wounds. There was not going to be, I was going to say maybe my opponent healed it with his card. No, that wasn't going to happen because the wolves are engaged. The wolves turn off like everything. So at the end of the round, I've also had Styr's influence went on Jarl's unit, who also went into the rear of the bows. Between Jarl and the cat, Jarl did a bunch of damage, and then the cat finished them off, which means the cat is now worth 2 VPs. But with the horse, my opponent moved the King's Men around, and then the King's Men annihilated Jarl. Jarl did not have the Endless Horde on him. I don't know if I drew it this game. But so the King's Men have scored a kill, but with Jarl out of the picture, the King's Men had to move all the way around there, which is what left this situation open for this grab. And because I have so many activations after my opponent, I'm in a situation where I can just totally free to capitalize on that. These guys actually, for their action, turned around to face Jarl, and so now they're facing into the rear of things, but I'm just never going to fight them. This is a hugely tough unit. They've got those defense rerolls with 3+ saves. I just don't want any part of that. What I did was, what was my turn? My turn was to kill a 6-point unit and score 5 VPs. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm on 6 points right now, and it's the end of round 2. Darkwing's Dark Words does this sometimes. Like, it is a scenario where keeping your eye on the surprise is hugely important, and it's a scenario where Varamyr is even better than usual, because he's such a small activation. He's everything else, right? To interact with these missions, you need to sacrifice the turn of a 4-point or 5-point or more expensive thing. Stannis' unit is, 8 points? 8 points for the Stag Knights. He had to take an 8-point unit taking a round off just in order to flip out one objective that he didn't want to have to deal with. That would have given me potentially, he got to make great plays, right? At the end of the round, he got to take, late in the round, both the horse and the swords. But it cost him an 8-point activation to get those things happening. The swords was what it was a charge, and then swords, and then, kill. That cost an 8-point unit's activation with a commander in it to make that happen. Whereas I can just be like, Varamyr's just going to doodle around, and he got me these 2 points. So I'm on 6 points right now, and it's turn 2. Things are looking extremely good. I might not kill another thing in the game, and I'm very, very close to being able to run away with this. The closest thing to a fly in the ointment is the fact that this cat is currently worth 2 points if it dies. But that is not what's going to happen. And I don't have any further pictures because the game is going to end at the end of this round. What is going to happen is these raiders, the raiders with the Walrus clan chieftain, are going to charge the King's Men, just tie them up. I've got first player on turn 1, so Styr is going to activate. So the very first activation is Styr claims the swords. These raiders attack. They have gang up. Resilience can't be used. 7 dice on 3s with Sundering. And we deal a bunch of damage to Stannis. and he tries to heal. I just swing again. Stannis takes a swing at the wolves, and the wolves actually survive, which is just horrifying. Or maybe the wolves die. No, the wolves survive, and then the wolves swing and they kill Stannis, and they move back to here. So Stannis is out of the picture. The Weeper's going to stay here. These raiders are going to move up in this direction and engage, tie the Kingsmen down even further. These guys are just going to reorient themselves. The cat runs away. Ygritte sits there. So we've got, if we want to sort of just like pause for a second, how are we standing? This objective is unoccupied. Both of these objectives are controlled. Multiple things are tying down these Kingsmen. Stannis is dead, so I'm on 7 points. And to add insult to injury, 2 more things will happen. Varamyr is going to move forward onto the center objective, and then I am going to use NCU activations late in the turn to flip an objective in, which gives me 2 points for having an unengaged model in my opponent's deployment zone, which is the wolves. So at the end of this turn, we go from 6 points to... So we were on 6, 7 for the kill, 8, 9, 10 for the mission objectives being controlled, 11, 12. So this is a 12-2? Something like a 12-2 win. And the fact that this list like doesn't give up victory points, it didn't even really come into play. This is what happens when you force multiply, activation advantage, mobility, and just hit a line in all points, and then also make really good use of Jarl. Jarl and the cat, like they are 6 points, they accounted for a 6-point unit and then dragged a 7-point unit out of the fight. I am really, really liking them as an addition to this list because it lets you have this frontage of 5 units with like potential endless horde respawns, this really wide line with the monsters scattered in between it, and lets you bring something around behind to make actual use of your numbers. 6 infantry units in a list is literally unthinkable without Jarl. So he's just been super fun to play. He's died like every single game, but I've been absolutely loving him and absolutely loving this list, and I will basically not play it again because it is, for practical purposes, probably... I don't feel like I've played a more powerful list. The closest thing to a more powerful list I have played is like one game with 2021 Othel Yarwick, which I played just to see how it was, threw up in my mouth, and then never played him again. This feels way more interesting, way more interactive, way more technical. Othel Yarwick was just, I'm going to shoot you like with 40 dice in the course of a turn. On 2s with Sundering and Vicious. It was deeply non-interactive. This is deeply interactive for the Free Folk player, but it's kind of non-interactive for their opponents because, oh, you killed a thing. It's worth no points. Again. The Free Folk player is wide enough to be able to sit on objectives because they're running 2 NCUs and bloody 9 units. And the units all respawn. The wolves come back, the cat comes back, the raiders come back. Varamyr is the only model worth points in the entire list. It is hugely powerful. I would pit this against anything in the entire game. The only thing I can think of that isn't... There are a few things I can think that, like, if you specifically build for them, they might do okay. I think Lannisters running an 8 activation, 3 halberdiers, 2 crossbows, Kevin in crossbows, Bronn in crossbows, 3 4-point NCUs. That might do it. That might do it because you have a lot of firepower out of that list. You can concentrate force, and importantly, you can try and shoot the bloody animals. And those crossbows are tough enough that the beasts, like if you panic a Shadowcat and it runs into like Kevin Lannister's unit, I'm not sure I actually want to run a Shadowcat into a unit that's going to Lannister's Supremacy back with a -3. I need a 5 to fail that, and a 5 panic check with a panic token is like surprisingly easy to do. So like there's that as one thing. There's the Lannister cards interact well with the engagement. You can turn off all of these abilities. You can turn off Val and Styr, both of which is massive. Val especially. Val activating late in the game, just being like, no, you don't get to do a maneuver. Stuff that. Super powerful. And being able to counterplot, not so much Endless Horde, but being able to counterplot the companion resummon, I think is really, really good. So they have the tools for it, and then you have... That list has 5 good quality infantry units because the halberdiers are so good. But I do think there is still the risk that the list just overwhelms one side, crushes a halberdier unit, rolls in. It will still be very, very difficult, but it might be able to do it. You could potentially even do like red cloaks with Bronn, red cloaks with Kevin, and just fight. Just come forward, swing the panic checks around. That actually might do it, to be perfectly honest, is red cloaks, halberds, 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 and if you have the High Sparrow as your third NCU, so we go Baelish, High Sparrow, and Baelish, High Sparrow, and the Maestro, the guy that puts weaken out on things. Two red cloaks, like you have to have the crowns, but you have Baelish and you have Kevin, so you claim the crowns anyway. Those red cloaks plus the High Sparrow against this kind of list actually might sustain your list through it, because you just put the High Sparrow's influence on something and you just drill it out with panic check after panic check after panic check that the raiders just can't pass. The Free Folk list actually has to deal with that. Literally, by the second the High Sparrow's influence comes down, they have to run that raider unit away, because you will heal so much from forcing those panic checks. I think that list can actually beat this one potentially. Otherwise, Martells. Free Folk have no fundamental way to deal with Doran Martell NCU. Doran Martell is not what I would say the best 4-point NCU in the game, because Peter Baelish trivializes him. And for that reason, I actually haven't seen Doran Martell much. But if Doran is in one of two lists in a House Martell list, he is going to probably score 6 VPs. And for all of this lists, I don't give you any VPs. That is a pretty hard number to deal with. Otherwise, the only other thing I can think of is if you custom build a Night's Watch list with relentless, like good relentless things, and Othel Yarwick and just went hell for leather after the dogs, you might be okay, because relentless against this kind of a list shreds. But you run into the problem where the Free Folk player can fall back on the plan to play passively against you. They're going to run them to objectives first, they're going to seize them first, they're going to slowly give ground, and they're just going to let you kill a bajillion raiders over the course of the game. They're going to give up 0 VPs. All they need to do is outscore you by turn 6, and they'll get there. So I think this is tough for Night's Watch. It's very tough for Starks. It's tough for neutrals, obviously. It's pretty tough for Greyjoys. Your best bet is a heavy sustain Reaper list, probably. Don't try and beat Free Folk at their own game as Greyjoys. It sucks. It just does not work very well. Yes, you have 4-point archers, but your list just thins out too easily. I think you want stuff that is sort of like heavy enough in multiple places to take this fight. You can get a lot of pillage against this list, but it's a tough matchup. And then, yeah, Lannisters, I actually think probably going to have the best choice. Targaryens, I would once have been horrified of with this list, because Khal Drogo just chops off all of the attachments' heads, and I freaking lose. Like, it just feels bad. But Khal Drogo needs to roll a 5 to do that now, and I no longer have a morbid terror of field control, because the Endless Horde doesn't interact with it. And so this has become a very good fight versus Targaryens. I'm not sure what Targaryens would do against this. They probably do have something. But yeah, the natural predators of this list, such as they are, I think are the Martells, and I think Lannisters have an okay game. So I would like people to find ways to counter this, because this is bullshit. It is very, very powerful, probably too powerful. One of the things I've heard suggested is that insignificant change from this unit does not give up VPs through combat to your opponent scores 1 VP through combat for every 2 insignificant units destroyed. Just so there is some chance to get like some points if you are actually able to hammer blow through the army. But even that, this just plays. It's super, super strong. Don't play this. Maybe in an event. I have. Do as I say, not as I do. Nevertheless, these were 3 very interesting games. The mag list is probably back to the drawing board. This list is going in a sealed vault, and will be bought out only for special occasions. I enjoyed it, but I think it's just not something I can play much. It's just, I have a rule of thumb, which is to always play the second most powerful thing, and this is fundamentally one of the most powerful lists in the game. So, hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time.